Chapter 1, The Debt in the Name. In 1887, when Nebraska's first autumn rain fell, I had just turned 1 year old. My wet nurse Martha held me on the veranda of the Kane Ranch, listening to the sound of rain hitting the cottonwood trees outside, and murmured softly, "Such a lovely name for the young lady, Penny Kane. From now on, you'll surely live a peaceful, steady life." But only later did I learn that the name Penny had been bought with my birth mother's life. After giving birth to me, she'd passed away from childbirth complications, leaving me with my nominal father, the ranch owner, Kane Blackwood. My first real memories date back to when I was 6. That day, officials from the state government arrived at the ranch carrying a gilded gift box. Inside was a woolen coat embroidered with the state emblem, said to be a personal reward from the governor, honoring Kane's contributions to border security. The ranch hands gathered around the coat, marveling at it. I leaned in to touch it, the wool itched my palms, and somehow, as if possessed, I held a candle flame to it. The moment the wool caught fire, chaos erupted across the entire ranch. Martha pinned me to a chair, and I watched Kane, the man who always wore leather boots and had a stern expression, bow deeply to the officials. His back had always been straight, but that day, it curved like a cottonwood tree crushed by a blizzard. Later, I stayed in bed for half a month, not because I'd been punished, but because I was terrified. Kane had never laid a finger on me, yet when I saw him standing beside my bed, the emotions churning in his eyes frightened me more than any whipping. "Penny," his voice was hoarse, "the rules of this ranch are harsher than a prairie blizzard. You must learn to rein in your temper." Back then, I didn't understand. He wasn't talking about ranch rules, but about how to survive. There was a boy on the ranch 4 years older than me, named Eli. Kane said he'd found the child after suppressing prairie bandits. At the time, the baby had been wrapped in a swaddle with a copper plum pendant inside, and when the child opened his eyes and smiled at him, even a man as hard-hearted as Kane had surprisingly felt compassion. Eli always followed behind me. When I got into trouble, he took the blame. When I was unhappy, he wove little willow horses to cheer me up. Once I asked him, "Do you miss your parents?" He squatted on the ground, holding a cottonwood leaf in his hand, and said softly, "Mr. Blackwood says my parents are watching over me from heaven." I reached out to wipe the mud from his face, suddenly thinking that having a found family was better than having none at all. Kane rarely stayed in the ranch's main house. Most of the time, he patrolled the prairie or went to town to handle ranch business. But every time he returned, he always brought me something new: raisins from New Mexico, silk handkerchiefs from San Francisco, and wooden kites he'd carved with his own hands. Every year on my mother's death anniversary, he would take Eli and me to the old cottonwood tree outside the ranch and fly 3 kites, one large, one small, and one tied to the tree trunk. He'd say, "Your mother loved cottonwood trees the most. This way she can see us." Back then, I always avoided him, finding the smell of leather on him too strong, and thinking the stability he offered was not what I wanted at all. It wasn't until I was 12 that I woke up one night to get a drink of water, and saw him squatting in the corner of the courtyard. He was carefully picking out intact leaves from a pile of withered cottonwood leaves and placing them gently in front of the memory box in the living room, the only place where my mother's relics were kept. Moonlight fell on his head, and only then did I notice that his temples had already turned gray. Chapter 2, The Kite After Autumn Rain. In the autumn of 1903, the season arrived earlier than usual. When the first autumn rain fell, I was sewing a sachet in my room when Eli burst in suddenly, holding a note and looking pale. "Penny," his voice trembled, "word came from town. The governor wants to arrange a marriage for you. The groom is the son of the railroad tycoon." The needle in my hand dropped onto the cloth, pricking a small hole. Kane happened to be at the ranch that day. He sat in his study, staring at the note for a long time. When I pushed the door open and walked in, I saw him holding an old handkerchief embroidered with a wild rose, my mother's handiwork. "Penny," he looked up at me, his eyes holding a tenderness I couldn't understand, "the person by your side should be someone you like. Otherwise, this life will be harder than guarding an empty ranch." I said nothing and turned to leave. In the hallway, Eli stood there, holding a newly carved wooden kite. "Penny," he scratched his head, "Mr. Blackwood said tomorrow will be a nice day. Let's go fly kites on the prairie." The next day, the weather was indeed clear. Beneath the old cottonwood tree, Cain flew the large kite, the spool spinning quickly in his hands. Eli helped me hold my kite, and when the wind blew, it soared into the sky, carrying my laughter far away. "Penny, look." Eli pointed upward, "Doesn't it look like a prairie eagle?" I nodded with a smile, and suddenly I saw Cain looking at us, a faint smile on his lips. It was a soft smile, yet it dispelled the weariness in his eyes like sunlight. But this peace didn't last long. A few days later, Eli told me that rumors were spreading in town. Prairie bandits had started harassing the border ranches again. My heart skipped a beat, knowing Cain would have to go on patrol again. Sure enough, that afternoon, the county sheriff arrived at the ranch with a notice, ordering Cain to lead the local militia to set out in 3 days. That night, I stood outside the study for a long time. Cain was inside writing a report, the oil lamp casting his shadow, flickering on and off. When I pushed the door open, he looked up and put down his pen. "Is something wrong? Can't you not go?" My voice was soft, yet it carried a plea. Cain was silent for a long time before speaking. "Penny, I'm the ranch owner. Guarding this prairie is my duty." He stood up and walked toward me, reaching out as if to touch my head, but then pulling his hand back. "When I return, I'll bring you maple sugar cakes from Kansas City." I said nothing, turning and running back to my room. Eli was waiting for me there, holding a sachet embroidered with a plum blossom. "Penny," he handed it to me, "it's filled with lavender to calm your nerves. If you miss me, just smell it." I took the sachet, and tears suddenly fell. "Eli," I choked up, "are you going to leave too?" He squatted down to look at me, his eyes firm. "Wherever Penny is, that's where I'll be." But I never expected he would lie to me. The day before the militia set out, Cain brought Eli to see me. Eli was wearing a new leather armor, holding the hunting knife Cain had given him. "Penny," his voice was a little hoarse, "I'm going to the border with Mr. Blackwood. I want to protect you, and protect this ranch." I froze in place, the sachet slipping from my hand. "What are you saying?" I couldn't believe my ears. "You promised you'd stay with me forever." "Penny," Eli picked up the sachet and handed it back to me, "when I come back, I'll marry you. Will you wait for me?" I didn't answer, only staring at him as tears streamed down my face like broken beads. Cain stood aside and sighed softly. "Penny, let him go. A young man needs to venture out into the prairie to grow." 3 days later, the militia set off. I stood on the dirt road at the edge of the ranch, watching Cain ride on a tall horse, wearing that familiar leather armor, with Eli following behind him, his posture straight and strong. The wind blew their capes, making them look like 2 spreading prairie eagles. "Father! Eli!" I shouted loudly, "You must come back safely." Cain looked back at me and nodded firmly. Eli also turned around, smiling at me, clutching the plum blossom sachet in his hand. The figures on the dirt road gradually faded away, and I stood there, holding the wooden kite Cain had given me, my heart feeling empty. The wind was strong that day, blowing my tears into a mess, yet I felt as if the wind carried the dust of the border and their scents. Chapter 3: Gossip in Town. After Cain and Eli left, the ranch grew quiet and desolate. Every day, the old butler Ben would report news from the border to me. At first, all the news was good. Cain had led the militia to destroy 3 bandit dens in a row, and Eli had also distinguished himself, being promoted to squad leader. I listened happily, reading the letters they sent back every day before carefully storing them in a wooden box. Cain's letters were simple, mostly telling me to take care of myself and not to worry about them. But Eli's letters were long. He would tell me about the prairie scenery at the border, the militia members he'd met, and the nervousness he felt during his first confrontation with bandits. Once he wrote, "Penny, today I drove off a group of bandits. I wasn't scared at all, because I knew I had to protect you and the ranch. I looked at the letter and tears fell again. I knew the border was dangerous. When he said he wasn't scared, he was lying. But before long, the gossip in town took a turn for the worse. Some said Kane was colluding with bandits at the border and embezzling supplies from the state government. Others claimed Eli had betrayed Kane and defected to the bandit leader. As I listened to these rumors, I felt anxious and angry, wanting to go to town to argue with the governor, but Ben stopped me. "Miss Penny," he sighed, "the situation in town is unclear. You can't risk going there." I knew he was right, yet I couldn't suppress the anger in my heart. That night, I found the wooden kite Kane had given me, and ran to the old cottonwood tree outside the ranch. The wind was strong, and the kite couldn't fly. I squatted on the ground, hugging the kite and crying. "Father, Eli," I choked, "come back soon. I miss you so much." Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Eli. He was wearing plain clothes, his face tired, yet he still smiled at me. "Penny," he walked over, reaching out as if to touch my head, "I'm back." I froze in place, unable to believe my eyes. "Eli," I stood up and threw myself into his arms, "why are you back? Where's Father? Is he okay?" Eli held me, his body stiff. "Penny," his voice was hoarse, "Mr. Blackwood, he's fine. He sent me back to check on you." I didn't think much of it, pulling him back to the ranch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. He rarely mentioned anything about the border, and every time I asked, he'd change the subject. Moreover, the plum blossom pendant around his neck was gone. One night, I woke up to get a drink of water, and heard Eli talking to someone in the study. I leaned close to the door to listen, and heard him say, "The governor said that as long as I can get evidence of Kane colluding with bandits, he'll spare Penny." My heart sank instantly. So that's why he'd come back, to frame Kane. I pushed the door open and walked in. When Eli saw me, his face turned pale. "Penny," he tried to explain, "it's not what you think. That's enough." I cut him off. "Eli, I never thought you'd be such a person. Father has treated you well, and I've always regarded you as family. How could you betray us?" Eli looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. "Penny," his voice choked, "I had no choice. The governor is threatening me with your life. Don't say another word." I turned and ran back to my room, slamming the door in his face. That night, I cried for a long time, clutching the sachet he'd given me, my heart feeling as if it were being cut by a knife. The next day, news spread in town that Kane's collusion with bandits had been proven beyond doubt, and the governor had issued an order to seal the ranch and arrest all those involved. As I watched the state police arrive to seal the place, my heart turned cold. Ben stood in front of me, shouting, "Our master is innocent. You can't do this." But the state police paid no attention. They arrested Ben and me, preparing to take us to the town jail. Just then, Kane returned. He was wearing blood-stained leather armor, holding a revolver in his hand, his eyes filled with rage. "Who dares to touch my daughter?" he shouted loudly, and the state police froze, afraid to step forward. "Father." I threw myself into his arms, tears falling, "You're finally back." Kane held me, patting my back gently. "Penny," his voice was hoarse, "Father's back. No one will hurt you now." But I knew things wouldn't be that simple. The governor wouldn't let us go. This crisis was only just beginning. Chapter 4, The Scaffold in the Town Square. After Kane returned, the ranch was surrounded by state police on all sides. The governor issued an order: Kane must surrender within 3 days, otherwise all ranch hands would be arrested and all related properties in the area would be seized. Kane sat in his study, staring at the notice for a long time. When I went in, I saw him holding my mother's memory box, his eyes filled with weariness. "Penny," he looked up at me, "Father is sorry for you. I couldn't give you a stable home." "Father," I walked over to him, "let's run away together, to California. There's an ocean there, and no one will recognize us." Kane shook his head, Penny, I'm the ranch owner. I can't run. If I flee, I'll truly be branded a criminal, and all the hands who've risked their lives for me will be implicated because of me. He paused, then added, moreover, the governor won't let us go. Even if we escape to California, he'll send people to hunt us down. I knew he was right, yet I still couldn't bear the thought of him dying. Father, I choked, isn't there any other way? Cain was silent for a long time before speaking. Penny, listen to me. I've already made arrangements. After I'm gone, Ben will take you to California. There are ranch owners I know there, and they'll take care of you. You must live well, forget everything here, forget Cain Blackwood, forget this ranch, as if you never had a father like me. I won't. I shouted, Father, I don't want you to die. I want to stay with you. Cain looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. He reached out to stroke my head, saying softly, Penny, be obedient. Father can't stay with you any longer. You must take good care of yourself. Remember, no matter what happens, you must live with a smile, because your mother would also want you to be happy. 3 days later, Cain was taken to the town square for execution. Ben hid me in the crowd, and I watched him tied to a wooden frame, his body covered in wounds. The governor himself supervised the execution, sitting on a high platform, and looking at Cain with cold eyes. Cain Blackwood, the governor's voice boomed, you colluded with bandits and betrayed the people of this state. Do you confess your crimes? Cain lifted his head, his eyes blazing with anger. I, Cain Blackwood, have guarded this prairie all my life. I have never been unfaithful, he shouted loudly, it is you. You colluded with bandits just to seize my ranch, and you killed the brothers who fought alongside me. You hypocrite. The governor's triumphant face turned pale, and he shouted loudly, execute him. Just then, Eli rushed out. He was wearing a white shirt, holding a hunting knife, and shouted at the governor, hypocrite. If you dare to kill Mr. Blackwood, I'll kill you. The state police surrounded him at once, yet Eli showed no fear. He waved his knife and charged at them. But how could one man stand against so many police? Soon, he was surrounded, his body covered in wounds. Mr. Blackwood, he looked at Cain, his eyes filled with guilt, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect Penny. Cain looked at him, his eyes filled with complex emotions. Eli, he said softly, you did nothing wrong. I'm the one who's sorry for you. I couldn't give you a stable future. Eli smiled, then used his last strength to shout at me, Penny, live well. Don't cry. With that, he fell to the ground, never to stand up again. I looked at Eli's body, my heart feeling as if it were being torn apart. Cain also looked at Eli, tears filling his eyes. Carry out the execution, he said softly, I, Cain Blackwood, have no shame before the prairie, before the people of this state, and before all the people under heaven. The executioner raised his gun. I closed my eyes, tears falling. I knew that from this moment on, I would no longer have a father, no longer have Eli. I would be all alone in the world.